Today, summarizing 2014, global economy in peril, democracy in decline, but decentralization on the rise. Your host is Rick Falkvinger, and this is Liberties Report.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Good evening and welcome to Liberties Report Week 51. As the year draws to close, it's appropriate with a summary of important trends this year and a bit of analysis. 2014 has been characterized by turbulence in finance, in democracy, and in centralization. Let's look at them one at a time. First, the economic shocks toward the end of the year will have repercussions far into 2015. You don't just have the price of a common commodity, oil, and expect it to go unseen. And in particular, when it's the commodity that people frequently go to war over, the consequences are far, far beyond the ordinary. The reasons for oil halving its price in 6 years from $105 to $55 is a simple matter of supply and demand, with the United States having gone from being one of the world's largest buyers of oil on the open market to being being the largest producer of crude oil on the open market. It goes without saying that without the United States buying orders, the price goes down radically. The Russian ruble is shaky at best following this oil price fall. The US dollar is precariously balanced in a situation where anything unexpected will topple it, and the euro is threatening by multiple issues, the closest of which is a looming Greek exit from the eurozone, which may become reality following a possible re-election. A lot of things are up in the air at the moment, and those who want a stable, predictable world will have to look elsewhere for the time being, because a lot of changes are coming over the next few years. Even if it's impossible to tell what'll take its place, the US and the Eurozone are looking increasingly unstable, both of them. Just to point to one of many dynamic effects. What'll happen to London housing prices as the plentiful, rich rubles stop coming in and even start pulling out? Many economists say we've been living in an ever-inflated bubble, kind of akin to how a forest guard doesn't want a fire breaking out on their shift. It's okay as long as they manage to knock it over to the next shift, with somebody else accountable. And if this happens for long enough, there's just going to be an increasing amount of combustible material that needs to burn off. And so the fire, when it arrives, is going to do much more damage to the ecosystem than it would have done if it had been allowed to flare up naturally. The economy has worked pretty much the same way for the past 4 decades, a not-on-my-shift mentality, and so the bubble burst has been continuously pushed out at the price of inflating the bubble. Most recently, that was in 2009, when collapse was staved off by quadrupling the USD money supply, thus vastly increasing a future fall height. If and when such changes happen, things are going to get worse, not better, for the citizens. A government will always save itself first, before it caters to the needs of its citizens. We had a recent example of that on Cyprus, when the government there confiscated a bunch of bank account savings to save itself. And this ties into the second major trend of 2014, a decline of democracy as such. We've seen Ferguson and Michael Brown. We've seen the Islamic State. We've seen the Mexican narcos. We've seen unrest in Greece. We've seen Eric Garner and many, many more examples of the same. Perhaps these things have always been here, but as of lately they are building up unsustainable tension. That, combined with a faltering economy, does not spell success for 2015. We've seen a widening gap between the ruled and the rulers. The so-called consent of the governed has become a thing of the past, an illusion, a ghost in the constitutions. And when the rulers try to save their money and status at the expense of the food and health of the ruled, things will turn ugly. It may not go that bad, but the potential is there, in the US, in Europe, in Russia, and elsewhere. Let me tell you a little story from the European Parliament to illustrate this. There was a reception for MEPs, that's short for members of the European Parliament, to call attention to the homeless people of Brussels, where the European Parliament is located most of the time. More precisely, this reception was a champagne reception, and to highlight that it was to remind people about the existence of homeless people, somebody had commissioned an artist to sculpt life-size statues of homeless people, statues which the MEPs were stepping over at their champagne reception to bring attention to the plight of the homeless. The worst part of this story is that it doesn't even strike anybody in the political ruling class as utterly repulsive. It's just another ordinary day at work before they go home in their limo. And this is what I mean with a growing divide, a dangerous divide. We're approaching Marie Antoinette land here. And there's nothing to suggest things are much different in the US, in Russia, or in China. But to counter these dark clouds, 2014 has also seen a further rise of decentralization. Bitcoin keeps making strides. The powers that be keep trying to clamp down on the internet. Centralized old media has utterly absconded from its role as watchdog of powers, and decentralized watchdog have taken its place. While the fight over the internet continues, and payment services for the internet in particular, Bitcoin has silently built out at the infrastructure level. While most people were laughing at the exchange rate being down about 50% over the year, while obviously at the same time ignoring that it was up over 6,000% last year. But that's good, really. When the services are there, the exchange rate will follow, and people have been building things in silence this year. That's good. The worst part about that is that they may be needed sooner than we think, sooner than we want. I'm Rick Falkvinge, and this is Liberties Report. We'll be back in the first week of the new year with projections about what may happen in 2015. Visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Happy holidays and good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Liberties Report is produced using exclusively free software.